I'd like to just be able to make sure that this music as made is all in one room, all on like one set that I can just play at any time, turn a camera on, and there's the growth of the career in the public eye in a way. And I just feel like I work against myself if I'm trying to make videos that have nothing to do or that are just kind of tangential to the aesthetic aims of the project in order to get eyes.
Welcome to For the Record, a casual, mostly unedited conversation series presented by Green Man, where we speak with music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice.
Today on episode 47, I chatted with Andrew Fox, a veteran musician. Fox is a songwriter and producer from New York City who makes music primarily under the moniker Visuals. He's released his brand of psychedelic songcraft on Nicholas Jar's imprint Other People, Bruno Pranzado's Berlin-based label The Song Says, and now New York's House of Feelings. Collaborating with Dave Harrington of Darkside, Michael Lovett of NZCA Lines, Metronomy, The Range, and others, Fox filters folk, psych, and soul through a pulsing electronic prism. He and I chatted about turning 40, an emergent shift in his artistic identity, and of course, all the great music that has made him. Hope you enjoy. Andrew, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to be chatting. It's been, I think, like 3 years probably since we connected, something like that.
Could be pre-pandemic, man. I think it's hard to say. I think the last time we sat down to talk, it was pre-pandemic. Yeah, in Bed-Stuy.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I remember meeting for a coffee at a cafe, as one does, in Brooklyn somewhere. And I think it was like near the Nostrand Fulton stop, on like the AC for some reason, and like that's what sticks in my head. And we like grabbed a coffee.
Sure, yeah.
We chatted for a while.
Yeah, I remember it well. It must have been, I hadn't lived in Bed-Stuy since 2020, so it was then.
Okay.
Could have been the pandemic, or it could have been right before.
Yeah,
probably right before.
Yeah,
yeah,
that sounds right.
Mm.
Well, then it's been too long.
It's been too long.
And yeah, so since it's been quite a while, I'm probably pretty rusty on these details, so I'm excited to dive back into them, even if we have had this conversation before, in various ways. But as always with this conversation series, I like to start at the beginning and just get a sense of where you're from, where you grew up, and when your relationship with music started.
Sure. So it started very early. My family was very encouraging of my musical instincts, so they put instruments in my hands as early as 2 years old. But I started in earnest around 8 or 9 with guitar, and that was my primary instrument. And I would gradually kind of pick up new stringed instruments like the bass, electric bass, and a little bit of upright bass in high school. And then when my voice stopped changing, I realized I could sing, or I could start to sing. And so from about 14, 15, I started taking myself more seriously as a singer and songwriter. And so, yeah, from that point, I was in little bands and also doing extracurricular formal band, never orchestra, but band, jazz band, and writing a lot of songs. Also began producing in a very rudimentary way around that time. I think I got my first cassette 4-track at 15, maybe 14 actually. Should have been 98. And it was pretty recent technology then. It wasn't that old. Now I still have that Yamaha 4-track, and it seems like completely from another era, like pre-electricity or something. But yeah, I started making productions on that. Even programming drums on my PC and like running a long aux cable to where the 4-track was, and doing my bedroom lo-fi George Martin tricks. And yeah, I guess from then I knew that I wanted to be making music with my life. I didn't know that it would be for sure my career, but I knew that it was extremely important to me. And in college, I essentially made my own study path that set me up for songwriting. So I did a lot of music, composition, ethnomusicology, and then creative writing. And when I got out, there was maybe a few paths I was considering walking down. But I ended up in Brooklyn in a house full of musicians and producers. And I realized that the other paths were kind of either distractions or could be dealt with later, them being theater and journalistic writing. And that was really it. I knew that it was going to be something with kind of difficulty. But I knew I was looking to be an artist in one way or the other. And because music had always been there and I was in the right context to grow, at around 22, I was like, yep, I'm going to go for it now. And I would say my 20s were a time of learning how to be a informed songwriter, artist, and producer. And there was a lot of shows, a lot of different bands, a lot of being in the New York scene, and then learning things kind of firsthand. And that set me up for visuals, which was started just around the last year of my 20s, or maybe slightly before. And that had been for the last decade up till now or more, that has been my primary project to release music and write and collaborate. And now, after about 5 records with that, I'm kind of at a point where I'm ready to kind of pivot to different kinds of projects, or just think of new contexts for me as a writer and performer, as well as now like a producer of other artists, which has been happening more and more, especially since I've started working out of a great studio room in Brooklyn, which is around the time of the pandemic. So there's been, I'm glossing over a lot, but those are kind of like the broad strokes. Very much started playing because my music was around. My dad was a big record collector and my mom sang songs. And so it was on her guitar that I started writing songs. And then, once you're a teenager, you start to understand a cultural context for that and have the means and kind of context to start recording and producing oneself. And yeah, and then in my 20s it became serious, and I was just exposed to the industry until I could figure out how to do my thing in a way that could get elevated, so that I could tour it and collaborate more widely. And that's what happens. And then visuals, I wouldn't say at this moment that it's completely run its course, but it's lived through a couple of different eras of the music business, the music world. And at this stage, I feel like I said what I more or less wanted to say publicly with that. I achieved the things I wanted to, more or less, like in the writing process, and then also in like the touring and kind of, being out in the world with the project. I got to scratch some itches, and now, yeah, I am just thinking of new ways to do it that are more contemporary to my own ideas about music making and what I'm listening to lately and how I am able to make the music versus how I was doing it, 10, 12 years ago at the start of visuals.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What are some of the different manifestations you see, like the different kinds of projects? Like, what are the potential evolutions or different paths that you see yourself potentially going into, post visuals, or at least in the next iteration of visuals?
Yeah, I think as for performing, what I'm excited about right now is to write some new material that's really starts with live performance. It's voice and guitar and textures and some samples and loops, that is grounded in kind of folk, baroque, and psychedelic drone, which again isn't like a huge pivot from visuals, but I want it to be very specific to that. I want the playing to feel different. I want the textures to feel different, and I want the influences to be notably different than some of like the kinds of 60s like pop and 70s like soul, and then like 80s new wave that visuals was built on. And this wants to be more like English folk rock, primitive guitar, drone, and musique concrète. And it's been evolving slowly. I've been kind of just practicing more as a guitarist again in ways that are old and new. So it's been really exciting. But in addition, it's like keeping a very strict framework for how the songs develop. Much of, if not all of the visuals material was developed in like a non-linear, like overdub process, so that it's a studio thing first and then the live thing is figured out. So, a band happens after the songs happen, after, all of the head scratching happens kind of solo in the studio. And specifically non-linear. And I wanted to engage in a new process where it's much more linear, in the sense of whatever I'm going to be recording is material that I've been able to develop before hitting the studio, or without recording, in a way. Just truly writing with all of the technology that I want to use. I'm not going to be Luddite about it. I want to use samples. I want to use looping textures, but I want to be able to have this kind of seamlessness where the writing and performing comes first, and the songs get a kind of maturity in that old school fashion. And then when it comes to studio time, it's not like a year of chasing the songs. It's just a few days of dedicated, focused recording and documenting. So it's like a bit of a flip in the production mindset between sculpting something in the studio to documenting something that I've been creating as a player and writer, which seems to be a very simple but a pretty difficult framework. You know, it's rigid in the right ways, because I think everything about the technological development since I started on that 4-track has led to more and more nonlinear, solo, piecemeal approach to writing. And on one hand, it's amazing. And I think as like a writer and producer, it's allowed me to explore all sorts of styles and feels and ideas. But, and I'm speaking maybe generally here, it can be quite confusing to the nature of a project, because you're not living that project in the world before it gets committed, or you're not living those songs in the world before they get committed to tape. So they're kind of unaged wine. And at the very least, it's just like exciting to have this new creative frame, and timely given my 40th birthday to think about, okay, you know, age is a number, but what can this moment allow me to navigate creatively? And at the same time, you know, just feeling like visuals as like an aesthetic concept is something that I was really thirsty about, you know, when it started. I really wanted to make specifically this kind of music. And at a certain point I did, you know, I did explore kind of not just like one narrow style within the idea of visuals, but like a couple of different lanes that throughout my releases are kind of woven into each other. And I, in a way, like I already have potential material for another visuals record, but I'm just like, I don't know if that's a burning desire anymore aesthetically to release music that was written in this way, that is like under this banner. I'd like to, in a sense, reboot and have these new aesthetic goals and this framework on the production and writing process that I think allows me to meet this precise moment in the music world a little bit better, in a way. I mean, obviously we're in a moment where the artist is content creator, and you have to be comfortable with that one way or the other. You have to be embracing of that, because that's how you're going to connect with people. And I really wanted to think about, okay, let's say it's 50% making content. And I probably would say that's conservative for a modern music project, or really any project, you know, a podcast included. And if it's that much content, like how, it's like I need to set it up, this project, in a way where that feels easy and coherent rather than something distracting. It's one of many reasons where it's like, I'd like to just be able to make sure that this music as made is all in one room, all on like one set that I can just play at any time, turn a camera on, and there's the growth of the career in the public eye, in a way. And I just feel like I work against myself if I'm trying to make videos that have nothing to do or that are just kind of tangential to the aesthetic aims of the project in order to get eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm drained by that. You know, I'm also drained by like spending incredible amounts of time and money making music videos that are also like questionable as far as what they can bring to the table as far as new listeners and viewers, I guess. And not that I love making music videos, but it's just this question of like, what are they doing for you? And
Mm-hmm.
what if, like, I see a lot of performers now, they can do like straight on camera takes and people dig it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and their stuff goes just on the strength of them actually being able to perform well. And because everyone can overdub and auto tune themselves to oblivion, if you have the discipline and ability to hone some real talent, you know, that still can go
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's maybe less forced than trying to package all of this shit into content, like a scroll friendly content, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So all that said, it's like, you know, I turned 40, I was like, okay, am I meeting the moment in my life in all of these different uh, sectors, really? Like in my career, like, am I meeting the moment aesthetically? Am I connected to what I'm actually wanting to listen to and what turns me on? Am I meeting the moment like as a artist project? If I think about just the mechanics of an artist project and how it's functioning now, and is it sustainable, right? Like, is what I'm doing something that I know that I can do any given day, or is it going to be like a battle to get a band together or to get a showcase or all of this and that? So that's kind of the biggest change as of late. But then also, since we talked, and maybe I was just getting into it then, I've been doing more on a kind of immersive audio lane, mixing a lot of my music and other people's music in Dolby Atmos and exploring what that's like as a compositional medium,
Cool.
as well as doing more sound art install oriented pieces. So those are kind of art projects or more under the production lane, but they're also influencing how I'm thinking about making records in general now.
Hmm.
Where if there is this idea that's possible within a music to make a statement with it in a spatial context, as in like just the placement of sounds can bring new meaning to the music, then that's something that I'm also trying to explore.
Cool. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I mean that's that's really resonant into in terms of like trying to find or like trying to align new aesthetics with ways that they can naturally fit in your life so they aren't overly draining, and at the same time you can kind of play the necessary but unfortunate content game, where you can create things that don't feel antithetical or misaligned or just like like I don't know, at best like very tangential to the actual music and actual aesthetics that
Yeah.
you're trying to lean into. I think like that's important, and I feel like today, like because anybody can edit and auto tune themselves to oblivion into oblivion, I feel like people, consumers, are listeners, let's call them listeners, are like hungrier for something that isn't that, for something that is feels more authentic, like more raw. And yeah, I'm curious to hear more about the aesthetics that you're considering, like things like English folk rock, like musique concrète, like that, like, you know, do you have like different touchstones in, you know, these realms that you're thinking about? Like who are the people in each of those that are, you know, inspiring you? Like how do you want, you know, to bring these pieces, you know, into what you're doing?
Well, the number one influence on my guitar playing at the moment is Bert Jansch, who's a guitarist.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say he's not as famous as Jimmy Page, for instance,
True.
right? But he's the guy that Jimmy Page
Mm-hmm.
steals from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's his very homespun combination of folk rock, blues, Baroque music, all with a very raw fingerstyle approach, very intense, and getting a lot of string sounds, getting a lot of like incidental sounds out of his acoustics.
Mm.
And he's a genius, you know, like there's no question about it. And his catalog is full with so many beautiful compositions. And just learning them out of sheet music right now is a deep part of my practice, where I feel like I'm getting new shapes and new playing concepts into my fingers. And that's helping me make a marked difference in how I'm writing or thinking about writing.
Mm.
So there are other people from that era. There's John Renbourn, who Bert played with, and there's like tons of fingerstyle blues and folk people that I've always listened to, but Bert is definitely the most important guiding light in reassessing my playing.
Mm.
I think there's also music from the Middle East that's creeping in. I've listened to a lot of like Hamza El Din in my days as a player. Not that guitar can really do what oud does, but just thinking about some of the ornamentation of oud music and a little bit in maqams generally, which also, of course, filtered through Bert's playing. And then to a certain extent, you know, when you say psychedelic music, you know, the classic touchstone is often Indian classical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's often kind of the sauce that we're talking about in a lot of 60s psych bands.
Mm-hmm.
Although not the only sauce, but a big component. So, you know, I think for me, there's like, there's definitely that as well. I mean, there's one artist called Shivkumar Sharma, who's a classical Indian dulcimer player, and like that kind of stuff, which wasn't really creeping into any of the visuals material really. I'm allowing to creep into this yet to be named new phase.
Mm.
So it kind of, because it's a folk music basis, it allows for other world musics to creep in, and I like that. And I'm thinking on a lyrical level about what the quote unquote authentic folk stories I knew or were around me, or of the place that I come from.
Mm.
And so taking inspiration from, and I grew up in the New York area, both in New York City and in Westchester, and there's a lot of ghosts in Westchester, actually. It's kind of a corny and boring place to be from, but when you dig into the history, you have all sorts of legends. Washington Irving being like the most famous storyteller in the English language around these parts. But then there's also, you know, you have old Indian legend or rather Native American from the Lenape tribe, and then you have Dutch legend because they were the first European settlers. So there's a lot to dig into. I'm like thinking about some weird characters as well that have walked around history. So I want to create a world for those kinds of lyrical ideas and story ideas to fit into. And I'm kind of simultaneously just beginning to write little short stories that could be part of the world of the next album. You know, but in a similar way, it's like I've always wanted to write lyrics first and then do the music, or write a story or a concept first and then do the music. And with visuals, I did that. So this is also like a and then being able to set some of these story ideas and lyrics to music. So other musical points of reference, I'm just thinking of like the William Basinski concert I went to earlier this year, and that music concrete approach of abstracting a sound by repetition and dealing with the decay of a sound and the transformation of the sound through repetition really appeals to me. And then, you know, there's like a whole slate of ambient music that's also going to creep into this. You know, I've been big into Hiroshi Yoshimura lately. Like Green and Surround come to mind.
Yeah.
In a more contemporary, there's some newer acts like this band Tanger, TNNGR, that are creating really beautiful ambient music, or folk artists that are straddling both, like oh dang, had her name on the tip of my tongue. Let me come back to that because Arouj Aptab, there it is. Arouj Aptab, that her output lately has been really doing it for me in terms of being in between song and texture. I mean, she definitely writes and sings songs, but especially on one of her latest albums, which is Collaboration, it moves like beautifully between the two. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, being in the New York area and being interested in the scene, like you can't really escape the influence of like Drew McDowall, who's like formerly of Coil, and makes just beautiful synthscapes. I saw him with Laraji at the Greenwood Cemetery earlier last year, which was incredible and very inspiring as far as the logic of their textures and it being ambient but also highly compositional, especially with Drew. So yeah, there's a lot I'm trying to pull together, but it feels again like very seamless because it's either music that I've rinsed endlessly on my listening journey, or music that I've like just like looking at the shows that I've been to, and it's like, oh yeah, those are the people, you know.
Cool.
So it's kind of like, I remember when I was doing visuals, like early days, I was trying to dig. It was like being influenced in some concepts and then finding artists throughout time to fulfill them. And this is a little bit the reverse, where it's just like I am into these influences, like, and it is what I actually want to listen to right now. So what do I do with that? So again, it's more of maybe a linear experience, broadly speaking, just like kind of more immediate.
Yeah, it feels like really fertile ground, and it just like rather than going out and bringing to you, just kind of looking inwards, taking stock, seeing what's already there, and then going deeper in those directions of where you feel pulled.
Yeah, I think it's a good time in life for that.
Yeah.
It's a good time. You get to a certain age and you're like, I just want to do things a little different. I just want to do things in a different way than I have done. Why not?
Yeah, indeed. Speaking of all these various influences in your listening journey, it feels like a good good transition moment to part two of the conversation, where I dive a little bit more into those things exactly. And my first question is how you discover music, and then if you could answer that question a bit through some of who your preferred curators are, or different outlets or platforms that you spend time with.
Yeah, I would say NTS is a big player. That's often a go-to radio for me these days. Has also been like BBC Six and some of the other internet radios like FMU, KXP. I like, and I think the pandemic reinforced the community feeling around radio.
Yeah.
So I tend to gravitate towards that because also I'm a bit nostalgic for when that was like the biggest way to discover. I know. And it's also, going to record stores around town, been finding some cool stuff at Superior Elevation, which is in Williamsburg. A friend of mine owns this amazing record shop in Red Hook called Record Shop. And he curates, beautiful deep dives. And then with some partners, he also opened up a new shop called Radio Shop in Crown Heights, run mainly by the Chances with Wolves guys. So, if you know their aesthetic, it's a lot of soul and kind of, I'd say pre 90s record collecting. In a lot of different genres, not to be too unspecific, but they are pretty wide net. And then just through the people that I know and being turned on in conversations with other musicians, and always having that check in about what people are listening to as part of it. So I don't have Spotify anymore. I use Apple Music, partly out of protest and partly because Spotify doesn't do Atmos, so it's not as useful to me anymore. So I don't discover much by algorithm, which is the dominant way these days. And obviously we all have mixed feelings about that. But I'm not really getting served a lot of music anymore, unless I'm really consciously seeking that out. So, I still will, for I guess just pure information's sake, check in on Pitchfork, even though that seems like a ghost ship.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll just check in on the past 3 or 4 months of reviews and make sure there aren't things that I really wanted to listen to that missed. Because otherwise I find it pretty difficult to like land on a publication these days that I'm reading consistently. Sometimes Wire, you know, I still like them, although I've had some friends who've had some like kind of quasi political issues with them, which I won't get into. But yeah, I would say like somehow I reverted mainly to like listening to DJs and talking to people, because just again it feels like there's more context there for discovery.
Yeah, that's a pretty, I feel like that's a pretty common answer on this, podcast anyways. And maybe that's just amongst like the small subset of music heads who really cares, about that context and having that be part of their music experience. I'd like to think it's like, a broader thing or like a broader sensation that maybe exists, and indicates that people are, kind of tired of not having that contextual layer, like used to exist in most common formats of consumption, things like radio, or like, going to record shops and things like that. But I don't know. I live in a bubble too. Okay, my next question for you. What's the first album you ever purchased? And then what is the most recent?
It's funny, I think you asked me this whenever we interviewed last.
Did I? I don't remember.
Yeah. And this is going to be a bit embarrassing, but I can remember, I think my first 2 CD purchases were like, and this first one isn't so bad. It was like a Mozart compilation.
Wow. Refined.
Sorry?
I just had
refined.
Yeah.
Yeah. As refined as an 11-year-old can get. And then I think the other one, I bought them at the same time, was Collective Soul.
Yeah.
At the time, so very radio 90s rock.
Yeah.
But they were big at the time, and I wanted to tune in. I mean, I also, those were probably the first CDs I remember buying, but then I also had a collection basically given to me because my dad used to run a vinyl record exchange and just had all this vinyl sitting around, and tapes and all of that stuff. So I was already kind of sitting on a lot of music and digging into it. But yeah, then I was the beginning of my CD buying. Might have been tapes before that, I think. But yeah, I remember how easy it was to like blow $100 at Tower.
Yeah.
It was really hard to not spend a lot of money every time I went into the music shop.
That's also really exciting. It's like, I have exactly this much money, which means I get to, go get exactly this much music, and then really having, to winnow it down from that to these things that you become really invested in because, you're spending actual money on these things. And that's kind of, that's been lost as well. I think the inherent value that we have with the music that, that we listen to.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last record I bought was like a week ago. I bought this Manitas de Plata record, flamenco, which is influenced by my trip to Spain, obviously. And it's just solo flamenco stylings, which are also creeping their way in, although not quite as strongly as other influences, but just like some of the ornamentation and logic of that playing. And yeah, just the power of one person, one instrument.
Yeah.
And or the way that additional rhythm, the compas, accentuate that music and complete it, but aren't very familiar or kind of disorienting sometimes compared to what we think about as like typical in like Western indie rock music, or whatever context visual lives in, like maybe there's like some of that more polyrhythmic thinking in there, but not as on the nose as what I think will be in the next music by way of things like flamenco and other I guess other folk music. I've been working with this Ganawa trio as well, so Moroccan music, like across the way from Spain.
Cool.
Producing and doing some drones to that, and those rhythms are probably the distant ancestor of the flamenco rhythms. Really, like if you look at the takraba, the Ganawa hand cymbal, and then you look at a castanet, it's very, very similar. Uh, so
Cool.
yeah, the latest one was this Manitas de Plata.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to listen to whatever this next project of yours ultimately manifests as, because it sounds like there's a lot of distinct influences that are flowing, through you right now.
Yeah. I don't have hard recording plans yet. I'm still in like writing and exploration phase, but hope to start committing some stuff, maybe by the end of the year, early next year.
Cool. All right, my next question for you: who are 3 artists of note that you heard for the first time in the past year or so?
Well, yeah, not to get too repetitive about it, but Arouj Abtab, who I learned about last year. Cameron de la Isla, who's the flamenco goat, flamenco singer, sang with Paco de Lucia, if you're familiar with that guitarist. And a third, in the past year, I'll give a shout out to this Atlanta band called Sword 2, because they're doing some very interesting Sword 2, like in Roman numerals.
Okay.
Yeah, they're doing some really cool grunge meets breakbeat, yeah, younger crew. Most everybody is now, but like, yeah, I dig the way they're recombining influences in ways that wouldn't have occurred to us in our 20s. Let's say it's that, yeah,
cool.
fabulous, yeah.
Great. Now here's the big question for you. You're going to a deserted island, and you get to bring 3 albums with you. What are they?
Astral Weeks.
Nice.
By Van Morrison, definitely. I think feel like I'd want to have some Joni there too. Maybe Blue, not to keep it only 60, but
And those are great records.
yeah, I mean, they never really get old. And the last one would be I'm pulling my wild card here. White Williams Smoke.
White Williams Smoke.
Yeah, White Williams, the record is Smoke. It's like
No, this one.
The mid-aughts release, kind of in the chill wave heap, but
I missed that.
Very, very glam-tronica, like Genius. That was a big influence on me. So I think I could keep rinsing that as long as I had some Van and Joni to, probably like wake up to or go to sleep to, and then cruise on Smoke. Smoke all day.
Cool. It sounds like a good routine on a deserted island.
Yeah, that works.
Cool. Well, that's about it. Thanks a lot, Andrew. It's been a lot of fun. It's been good catching up. For folks who want to tune in, pay attention to what you're doing, where's a good place for them to do that?
Yeah, the visual social channels are going to be active for the time being. I'll launch something new when it's time, and it'll be dead obvious through those. So yeah, keep up with me at Visuals Music.
Cool. And last but not least, now that you've been through the ringer of For the Record, who is another music head that we should have on the show?
Oh. Oh. Maybe I want to say my friend Kelly, but it'd be very hard to get her. Yeah, she's just releasing an album now, and it's truly all over the place.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, I think I have a friend who's just working on her first record, but she's making really amazing music. Her name's Miriam Turkey, and she's been Miriam Turkey, like the country. And she is she's making this kind of like Arabic pop that is really hitting for me, and we've collaborated before as well. And yeah, I think she'd be really interesting to talk to because her background, she's always loved music, but this is her first record. She's just in her 30s now, and her background is as a visual artist and designer. So she's kind of coming to it from that world. Yeah.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks for the interview, man. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I do this, like every 5 years at the very least.
Yeah, see you in 5.
Yeah, right around your 45th birthday.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and it's been good to see you.
You too, man. Ciao.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. That is a wrap on another episode of For the Record, a conversation series with all manner of music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's a production of Grey Matter and the new Crate Coalition experiment. in building connective listening graphs. We stamp every music mention that you heard here, from the names of musicians to DJs to journalists to venue owners. And in the background, we're mapping these names to form those yet unseen connective threads between them. Want to get involved? Check out our website, graymatter.fm. It's gray with an E. Or you can come hang out in the Gray Coalition Discord. We'll see you next time.